Your Humanities Half Hour is brought to you by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council, navigating the human experience together.
Hafade, Tero, and welcome to Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry, and today we are talking about the Chamorro language, specifically as it relates to place names in the Northern Islands, also known as Gunny. And here to share their expertise on this area are Professor Dr. Thomas Stoltz of the Linguistics Department of the University of Bremen in Germany, and also postdoctoral researcher Dr. Nataliya Levkovych. Guys, welcome. Welcome back to Saipan Thomas, and welcome Nataliya.
Thank you very much for inviting us here to the interview. Thanks, we are grateful to have this opportunity.
Well, I know that I'm definitely grateful because you have put in a lot of time, effort, and energy into this particular part of the local language that we can all benefit from. How long has it been that you've been looking at the Chamorro language?
At the Chamorro language, let's say my experience with the Mariana Islands started a long time ago when I was a little boy of 7-8 years old. I collected stamps. That was my hobby horse, and I looked especially at stamps with a historic value. And I came across the stamps from the German colonial period, and there was special stamps on which it said Marianen. And since my mother was called Marianne, I liked these stamps, and then I started to take an interest in the Mariana Islands way back in time. But other things happened in my life and I lost the interest and I even forgot about it. And for the second time, I didn't remember my stamp collection of my early childhood. But I came across interesting phenomena in the mid-1990s when I was looking for the Spanish influence of the Spanish language on languages that were spoken in the former Spanish colonial empire. So I'm still a specialist of Mesoamerican languages, so Nahuatl and Maya languages spoken in Mexico, for instance, and they are replete with Spanish words. The grammar is in a way remodeled according to the Spanish patterns. Then they show very many signs of Spanish influence. And I looked at the languages of the Philippines, Tagalog, for instance, and Bicol, and so on, and there are the same phenomena. And also in the languages of South America, Quechua, Guarani, and so on, they have the same elements there. And then I came across Chamorro. I didn't know that Chamorro existed before 1995. I perhaps heard the name before, but I was, let's say, focused on the languages of Mesoamerica at that time, and that's far away, of course. And then I looked at Chamorro and I thought, there are so many interesting things. The language as such is so interesting, and there are so little there's so little material on this language in my own discipline, so perhaps I should have a closer look at the language. And from that time onwards, I delved ever more into the language without speaking it, because I did it all from books and so on, and documents, and the written version of Chamorro plays a role as well. And so I got interested in the grammar of Chamorro without Spanish influence. It always plays a role, how much Spanish has influenced Chamorro and what phenomena it produced, because that's interesting for one of the research programs, international research programs in my discipline, that's general linguistics. We want to determine whether in situations in which two languages are in contact with each other and one is prestigious and the other is not, then the asymmetrical situation, one language borrows from the other, and is it, let's say, irregular, or can you predict what will be borrowed and in what chronology the borrowing will happen? And there's a lot of evidence that it's not random what happens, but there is a system to it, and we are trying to explore this system and explain it. So from very many languages we can see there are patterns. We can even predict this will happen first, and then as next, first they will borrow nouns and then at the end verbs, and sometimes in between also sounds and so on. So there is an interesting hierarchy and also chronology, and Chamorro is an important piece of evidence, also a kind of testing ground for these hypotheses about the chronology and so on. So that made Chamorro special because nobody else had studied it in depth before us. But contact is one thing, then this interesting general structure of the grammar. It's so different from European languages, for instance, that it is for many people difficult to understand how the system works. There is a system, it's simply different, and it needs to be explained for general linguistics. There are, of course, other linguists who are interested in Chamorro. We are not the only ones on the world. Sandra Chung, for instance, I don't know whether you know the name. She has been around here in the Northern Mariana Islands for many years. I think she has produced recently a huge grammar describing Chamorro according to a certain theoretical model. And that's a very good grammar, but there are still some gaps. There are always gaps. They have to be filled. You have to describe things that are not described in the grammar, so there's a lot to do still. And that makes Chamorro interesting, and you can compare Chamorro and the structure of Chamorro to the structure of other languages in order to come to conclusions about the possibilities, what is possible in a human language. For instance, that's a general question that keeps us busy in general linguistics. We want to generalize about languages, what is possible, and why do certain things never happen in languages, but others happen all the time. So there must be reasons for this. And at the moment we are still in the hunter and gatherer period of the discipline. We have to find evidence, pieces of evidence for something, and we have to look at all of the languages on the globe to find what is possible in the human languages. And Chamorro for quite some time was practically unknown to the majority of the linguists in the world. And nobody really knew, except some specialists, knew, okay, Chamorro is an Austronesian language, okay, this was agreed upon, but are there special structures in Chamorro? And most of the linguists would have been at a loss to tell you what was the case in Chamorro. Now we know more about Chamorro, and the more we know, the more interesting Chamorro becomes. So that's the more you look, you see, there are so many interesting phenomena. We could go on for ages to describe it for my discipline. This is, of course, for the academic part of the work. In what terms it is also important for the community, for instance, to revitalize the language, safeguard the survival of the language, and so on. That has to be seen in the future. So we find out something about the language in the academic department. What do the speakers of the language do with this knowledge? Can we transfer the knowledge appropriately to the community? This is always difficult because, as you told me before we started the interview, the texts the linguists produce are highly technical, and it's not a simple task for a layman to read this text. The texts are not primarily supposed to be read by people who not belong to the same academic community. So they are for the academic community. We still have to find a way to popularize translate the language into language in a way. So this was the thing. So Chamorro is really that's German element here. Chamorro is really a fascinating language, and I will continue to look at it also after retirement. So that is clear already. So we have a number of projects going on with this, and then perhaps you want to know this already. I started in 1996. We went on, and Chamorro is only part of a larger research program we have. There are other languages we have to take care of and other topics and so on. It's not the only language that we look at. And in 2017, we were, both of us, Natasha and I, were involved in a completely different project that was on place names in general. And we wanted to include place names from the Mariana Islands, just because we knew something about the Mariana Islands at that time. And we knew the maps of the larger islands of the northern Marianas, Saipan, Tinian, Rota, especially. And the maps are full of place names, the normal case in a way. And I said, we have no evidence for the northerly islands, so we have to look for the maps there. And the maps we found were empty, devoid of place names. And at first we thought, that's perhaps only this set of maps lacks the names. But then it turned out it was the only set of maps that existed worldwide for the, let's say, contemporary maps. It turned out to be a very paradoxical situation that islands that for some time were inhabited by people don't bear names for geographic objects. But I think about this project you want to talk in the second half of the interview.
Yes, and Nataliya, I understand that you were played a big role in actually doing a lot of the research, looking for these maps of our islands that are in your records in Germany. What was that process like?
You have to go to the library, you have to go to the archive, just finding the maps, if there are any, there are not so many, and looking at them and trying to find the names of those maps. It's not only work with the maps, but you have to look into the into literature. Travel logs, like literature that is written about Mariana Islands, and then look there. We have gathered, in this way we have gathered some names, some information, but it's not a lot of information. So we are still working, still trying to gather, to get some information on names. Which types of names we are interested, especially interested, which types of names are there? Are these Chamorro names, or are these colonial names like Spanish or English, Japanese,
Carolinian names?
Carolinian as well,
yes.
It is possible. So that is our interest.
Would you happen to recall off the top of your head how old is the oldest map that you have in your collection?
Oh, it's not really old. We have some of them that are American from 80s, if I don't. It's not the old one. It's contemporary, but the oldest is Spanish.
Spanish maps from the 19th century. There are also older maps, but they are concentrating on Guam. So that's not very helpful for reconstructing the place names of the northerly islands. So I think it's 1865 something. That's the oldest Spanish map. Then there are some German maps, but they are, let's say, they are too small to leave enough space for place names. And there are American and Japanese maps, and there's most of them. The Japanese maps are just reproductions in Japanese of pre-existing maps of other colonizers. So there's no, let's say they give the same information that the other maps give. So there's...
I see. All right, well, when we come back, let's look at, or not literally look at, but hopefully you could share some of those names. Okay, we'll be back after this break.
Looking for resources about Marianas history, culture, and more? Well, check out the Northern Marianas Humanities Council's collection. Our extensive video, audio, and photographic library can be found on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at 670 Humanities. Or check out the written resources on our website at nmhcouncil.org. And for those who prefer a good book, we also have a selection of local publications for purchase. So, dive in, explore, and share your comments as we navigate the human experience together.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Professor Dr. Thomas Stoltz of the Linguistics Department of the University of Bremen in Germany, and also postdoctoral researcher Dr. Nataliya Levkovych. Guys, people were sitting on the edge of their seats. What have you guys found in your decades of research about place names in the Northern Islands?
So to be honest, we have studied place names only for 7 years now, so it's not decades. But anyway,
no pressure.
No pressure. No, not for decades. But let's say we have found 2 handfuls of names, additional names, many of which had been collected previously by Scott Russell. But he hasn't indicated where he found these names. So there's just a list with indications of to which island these place names belong. But there is no, we don't know, and even Scott doesn't know, to what geographic object the name refers. There are names that look like village names, but perhaps they refer to something else. We don't know. And especially, we don't know where on the map of a Gorney Island the place name should be put. So we don't know what object and where exactly, where are the coordinates to put the name. So it's just...
it almost sounds like maybe it's something, and we should ask him this at some point, collected by word of mouth, talking to people, and people have memories like, I remember we called it this, but yeah, okay.
Yeah. I think like this, and we have studied a number of reports on the islands that were never really published. One of the reports was there's the only existing copy of the report from the mid-1950s about the Northerly Islands by the US government is somewhere hidden away in the archives of the Australian National Library. And when we asked for a copy, they asked money for the copy. They took the money, but then there was Corona, and we had to wait for 2 years until the copy arrived. Now we know that the guy who did conducted the research on the islands to assess their economic value for the US government, he mentioned a number of place names, not exhaustively, but for several of the islands. Yeah, there are 2 villages, and the one is called this, and the other is called that, and there is a mountain here, and that's called this and that. So we get some information, but it's let's say it's scattered. It's not really. It doesn't cover all of the territory. So some points can be named now. For a number of other points on the maps, we are absolutely uncertain. There is a name. We know that it is perhaps a valley, but it could be this valley, that valley, or another valley. So it's still open to precision. And if there are people who remember, yeah, this valley was called this, or the generation before us called it this when we called it differently, that would be very helpful to fill in the gaps on these maps.
Are there any names that stand out in your memory in particular?
Yes, there's one name, especially because it's even registered on the maps, these empty maps. You find very little dots there sometimes, and it says village. And if you look in at the report of the, don't remember the name right now, the US government official who went over the islands in the 1950s, he called these villages Song Song. So there are all of them. There is no other, there's another name, yes, but there are 4 villages in the Northerly Islands, on different islands. I will talk about them tonight, where there is one village, and the village is called in English village on the maps, but in the report the village is called Song Song. And then on 2 islands there's also Partido, another village, Partido, that never appears on the maps. So on 2 islands there were at least 2 villages. In the 1950s, the same guy reports also on other islands and speaks of 2 villages without giving names. So that's, if it is the same pattern, then perhaps one of them would be Song Song and the other Partido. We don't know that. And for 3 of the islands we can locate the 2 villages at different parts of the island. And for one island it's absolutely unclear where Partido was. Song Song more or less in one part, and Partido must have been somewhere else on the island. That is our guessing then.
If people are interested in seeing these maps or your research, where could they find it?
We have 2 publications already on this issue, and there are always all of the maps. We reproduce the maps there. You find them on the internet anyway, so you could look for the maps. We even if people are interested, they can contact us, and we can give them the indications. Therefore, this is a public domain. You find these maps there.
Sorry, the other thing I was going to ask, do you remember any names that, like a lot of times place names are after a particular geographical feature or something? Is there anything like that you guys have come across?
Yeah, of Pagan, this is the only island where you find also maps, names on the map. You find this like round rock, round mountain, high mountain, and so on. But these are Japanese names. They're not Chamorro names or Carolinian names. You find names for lakes also on Pagan. Northerly Lake and Southerly Lake, for instance. These are names in Chamorro. So that's the geographical location. That is the motivation for the naming of the lakes. And for the mountains, it's the height or let's say the shape of the mountain that motivated the naming. But for other places in the Northerly Islands without names on the maps, we haven't seen anything. There are some names we can't really identify the language of origin. So some of them don't look like Chamorro. They don't even look like Carolinian. One place name is, for instance, an English place named Arctic Ocean. Arctic Ocean on Anatahan, I think. What should this be? We don't know. Arctic Ocean. Perhaps sometimes it could also be a kind of ironic or fun expression, spontaneous coinage or something like this. So we can't be sure because we don't know from which source Scott Russell has drawn this expression. So perhaps he's now in Texas again. We can ask him whether he has his personal archive and finds this. Yeah.
You know, they say that language encompasses culture, or culture is contained in the language. Mm-hmm. If you lose a place name, how do you think that affects a culture?
Yeah, if you lose a place name, that affects culture much more than using it. Yeah. So it's a funny situation. Normally the places to which you refer with your own names for the places form part of your cultural heritage. So that, yes, that's your surrounding. It has also some kind of psychic closeness to you. So it's, let's say they are not really fitting terms for the relation between the speaker of a language and the place names. There's still a debate about it, but it's clear if you can't name places in your surroundings where you live or where your ancestors came from with an expression that belongs to your own language, there you create a distance between the place and yourself, and also your ancestry. In a way, you turn the place that belongs to your own historical background to a place that belongs to the other language whose expression you use for this place. So this is the way, if you have to use, let's say, an English name for a place, although there was a Chamorro name in the past, but you don't remember it, you anglicize the place in a way. Either you want to do this is one thing, or you don't want to do this, but you have no option. There's only this name, but you want it to be visibly part of your own cultural sphere, let's say. Then it's perhaps more helpful to use in an expression that is coined in your own language instead of using an expression that stems from another language, because then you somehow push this place into the cultural sphere of the other language.
That's deep.
Yeah, probably. It's a little bit speculative because we don't have hard facts that prove these points, but this is one of the theories that are around about the cultural impact not only of names but also of other expressions for, let's say, objects of your everyday life that belong to your culture, but you can't really name things anymore by using words from your own language, ethnic language. You have to use names from other languages. Then you perhaps create a gap between your own culture and the past and so on. Yeah. There is a perhaps always, because there is no hard proof of it. Yeah.
Nataliya, you kind of lit up when we were talking before the show about the special structures of Chamorro language. Could you give us maybe like the top two or three things that you see about the Chamorro language as linguists?
Actually, I'm not an expert in Chamorro language. This is Professor Stoltz is an expert. I'm interested more.
Eyes got bright.
I'm interested more in contact linguistic aspects, and Chamorro is very interesting for me from this perspective because Chamorro has been in contact and is still in contact with some languages like, for example, Spanish and English, and those languages influenced Chamorro in the way that some grammatical structures, but also some words came in Chamorro language and changed Chamorro language in a special way. These are loan words, for example, some conjunctions like
Conjunctions,
but. Using or speaking Chamorro, you use English conjunctions, for example, or some English nouns.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Some English nouns. So that's the interesting situation, how other languages influence Chamorro, but also Spanish. You have maybe you can tell more about Spanish influence on Chamorro.
Yeah, there's a lot of the many grammatical elements in the language in Chamorro have a Spanish background. Estar, for instance, está aquí, many para, and many other prepositions. Most of the prepositions are taken from Spanish. and also some of the constructions with masque for the comparative, bigger than, and so on. You can also use other things, but there is a Spanish option for you. It's no longer Spanish, it's Chamorro. It's in a way, let's say, an exaggeration to claim that this is still Spanish. It's part of the Chamorro language, and you make of it what you want to make of it. It's now part of the Chamorro language. It hasn't made the Chamorro language, let's say, less beautiful in a way. It's part of your heritage now. And it's interesting how these Spanish elements are integrated, and if you take them away, the Chamorro language wouldn't function anymore. It's practically impossible, and that counts for many languages worldwide. It's not the only case. You can take them away. Then you have to have some kind of ersatz material that would fulfill the functions that the Spanish elements fulfilled previously. So they have to find new things. And in other communities worldwide, also in Mexico, where there's a lot of Spanish influence, and there are people who claim we have to get rid of the Spanish elements and purify our language. And then many members of the speech communities react to this like, I have to learn my own language anew. No, I already know Spanish. I don't have to learn my ethnic language again with all these new elements there. I already had a fully functional language before. So that sometimes exaggerated purism leads to language death. That is also, you have to be very careful about how to handle the supposedly foreign elements in your language. So.
Well, I want to thank you both for your work and for sharing with us today. Any final thoughts before we go?
So, you want to know perhaps what I expect of my visit here is that people here in the Northern Marianas take an interest in this place name issue, for instance, and think about the possibility or consider the possibility to conduct this project in the future and give it a shape that is let's say, of use for the community here locally. We in Germany can perhaps function as consultants for the project, but we can't really carry out and conduct this successfully because we have reached a kind of endpoint for what we can learn about the Marianas in Germany if we stay there alone. You have the knowledge here directly on your threshold in a way. So I think that's something that is really a task for the people of the Northern Marianas.
Well, you've set us on the right path.
Yeah.
Nataliya?
Yeah, people here now know, maybe they knew it always, Chamorro is a very interesting language, not only from points of view like Chamorro is an interesting language, but as a contact language. It is, many linguists are interested in the subjects that concerning Chamorro from point of view of the language itself, but also from the general point of view, from the general linguistics. So if we study Chamorro deeply, we will know more about how human language functions. What is human language? Because the more languages we study, the more understanding we have how our brain functions and how our language functions. And for this, Chamorro is very important language, because not only European languages should be studied to make conclusions, but other types of languages like Chamorro.
Good point. We're a small language-speaking population, yet important to the big picture of linguistics. Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Our guests today have been Professor Dr. Thomas Stoltz and also Dr. Nataliya Levkovych of the University of Bremen in Germany, sharing about Chamorro and especially place names. This has been your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry.
Your Humanities Half Hour has been made possible in part by a major grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Democracy demands wisdom. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities. For more information or to share your thoughts, contact the Northern Marianas Humanities Council at nmhcouncil.org or on social media at 670 Humanities. That's 670 Humanities.